Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how creatives use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Ben Givarz. My guest today is Paul Falcone, the mix engineer crafting immersive live Dolby Atmos concerts for Mariah Carey's residencies at Dolby Live at Park MGM in Las Vegas. In this conversation, Paul shares his journey from growing up a music-loving kid in Brooklyn to becoming a top-tier recording and live mixing engineer, taking him through legendary New York studios like the Hit Factory and Right Track Recording, where he worked with icons like Michael Jackson, Missy Elliott, and Luther Vandross, to name a few, and led him to mix front of house for the one and only Mariah Carey. We talk about how he developed Mariah's Live Atmos show, collaborating with multiple teams and integrating the live tools into his custom workflow. He ultimately prioritizes emotional impact, especially for Mariah's amazing voice, using the Atmos technology to expand and enhance her live concert experience. Paul also shares his approach to refining and QCing the show, using a Cadillac enabled for Dolby Atmos as a reference environment, doing some of the first car checks for Live Atmos content. Mariah performed 36 shows in Dolby Atmos across her Celebration of Mimi and Christmas in Las Vegas residencies at Dolby Live, and Paul's attention to detail and craftsmanship was essential in delivering theatrical and emotional live Dolby Atmos performances that honor artistic intent. It's a great conversation with a truly creative and passionate engineer pushing the boundaries of immersive audio. Here's mixing Mariah Carey live in Dolby Atmos with Paul Falcone. Well, here we are just a few weeks after Mariah performed at the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics in Milan, and she's a nominee for this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class. This conversation is about you, but you must be excited to see all that's going on to celebrate her and her music already here in the new year, considering how you do such great work yourself to bring that music to people.
It's been quite a wild ride working with Mariah. We, in all the award shows that we got to work on in the last year, not to mention the Asia and Australia tours that we did, Christmas tour in the United States, 3 residencies at Dolby Live, 1 additional residency for her Christmas tour, also at Dolby Live, mixed in Dolby Atmos. It's really been wild. She's the most successful female recording artist of all time. And she writes such incredible songs. Her team is such a pleasure to work with. It's really been an incredible experience.
That's awesome. I can't wait to get into some of that, and what a great way to celebrate her and all the great work that you do together. Well, you're based in New York City, right? A city with deep musical roots and clearly deep roots for you. You came up during an incredible era of music, working at some legendary studios, right? Like the Hit Factory and Right Track with some of the world's top artists. Before we get into Atmos, can you take us back a little bit into like who you were working with and what those early years may have taught you about where you would go with sound from there?
Absolutely. So I'm sitting here at the Hit Factory in New York City. The Hit Factory has had many locations through the years, so it's a pleasure to be talking to you from this legendary studio. So to take it a bit further back than that, I was a kid born in Brooklyn. My family was always into music. Every family event I ever went to, there was always music around. There's always acoustic guitars and tambourines and just people singing. My dad played in a band. Some of my earliest memories as a kid is pushing a guitar amp down the street in Flatbush, Brooklyn. They were what you'd call a general business band, where they played block parties, weddings, charity events, and it was awesome. So I was, kind of always around music there. Once I got into my junior high school years, I was also into music from jamming with my family all those years. Started experimenting with bands, but also started experimenting with electronics. At this point, we were in the suburbs. Once I got to high school, this turned into full-on theatrical productions and sound crew, and I really got the bug for show production. Not only that, really wanted to get into recording studios. When I was about 14 years old, I picked up a copy of Mix magazine, saw a recording studio on the front cover, and could not believe what I was seeing. I was like, this is where I want to go. When I got my driver's license at 16, the first thing I did was start looking in the local music papers for an internship in a recording studio. I didn't even know what I was asking for. I was just like, hey, I just want a job. I found a place local to where we were living that was working on some pretty major projects. I was a 16-year-old kid, still in high school, sitting in the studio every day in the summer, just kind of learning. There, it was awesome. They had, 24-track analog, 48-track analog, small analog desk, but they also had early sound tools, and they also had, a waveframe, audio frame, another early DAW. So it was an amazing thing to be exposed to at such an early age. Went back to high school, still wanted to go to college, but also still wanted to work in the studios. Went to Berkeley, Got to Berkeley, wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. I only went there for 3 years, but did finish all my classes, stacked up on classes when I was there, got into the MP&E program as fast as possible, loaded up on those classes and just like flew through the program. Got right back to New York in the studio that I was interning at. So I was interning at a studio at the time called Platinum Island. Through my sound crew experience and through my live playing experience and getting early exposed to early computers, and my school had a Juno 106 with MIDI capabilities, was sort of exposed to early programming. Once I got to Platinum Island, I saw that while these other assistants and interns knew the analog side of things that I still had a lot to learn for, MIDI programming was a big deal. This was the 90s. So I excelled pretty quickly because I was the assistant that could do MIDI programming. Now, ironically, that was in this studio that I'm sitting at right here long before it was the Hit Factory. Troy took this place over, but decades ago in the 90s, I was sitting in actually the room next door, the story that I'm telling you, and the room downstairs, story that I'm telling you, it took place there. Just a bit of New York history. Anyway, so from Platinum Island, go back to school. I was trying to line up a job at a studio called Battery. A studio wants to hire you when they have the need to hire someone. Didn't work out. So I ended up going back to Platinum Island. Didn't really like the way it was going there. Sent my resumes to a couple of different studios. One of them was the Hit Factory. I had already started assisting and a little bit of engineering at Platinum Island. Went to the Hit Factory, became a general assistant. General assistants are, especially at Hit Factory, you're the runner. So when I got to Hit Factory, the reason I wanted to go there was every record I looked at had the album credits, of the records that I would have looked at said Hit Factory. From hip hop, which was blowing up in New York right now, and all the pop records. And not only that, Broadway soundtracks and orchestra sessions. So I wanted to go there to learn more and just get involved and, show what I could do. But also I wanted to assist. I wanted to engineer. But no, you're a general assistant. So when I got there, Michael Jackson had 2 rooms booked. Mariah Carey had Studio One booked pretty consistently. They had another building that was hip hop sessions all day and night. And I don't think I saw the inside of those rooms for 6 months because I was out on the street, going to get people stuff for delivering cassettes and CDs and just hustling. So the other thing we had to do every day was like sharpen the pencils and, make sure there was enough, pads in the room and all that. One day, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning. The clients walk in. There's no engineer. There's no assistant. And I'm in there with my cart full of pencils and pads and whatever it is. I'm sharpening pencils. They're like, hey, where's our gear? Where is everybody? I immediately take that cart, shove it out of the room, call the receptionist, call the rental department. Like, hey, where's all this gear? Where's the assistant? Where's the engineer? They're like, nobody's here. I go downstairs, get the gear, set up the gear, and start running the session. Eventually, the engineer shows up. Receptionist is calling me. Hey, we need you to go buy milk for Studio 2. I'm like, hey, I'm getting the session set up in Studio 3. Eventually, this gets up to management. They're like, stay exactly where you are. And that's how I started assisting. And I brought all the knowledge of MIDI programming that I had from Platinum Island to the Hit Factory. People are like, how do you know all this stuff? I'm like, this is the stuff I've been doing. So it was dope. So now I'm an assistant at the Hit Factory. Now I'm getting to learn from, Al Schmidt, occasionally like Elliot Shiner. Really, the guy who was there a lot was like Tony Maserati. Just like who's who of like, the engineers that we all look, as like the modern greats. So it was an amazing place to get experience. All the while, I'm still into this MIDI programming thing, getting into, and still, now I have my own sound tool system, early Pro Tool system, like the original internship. But, I'm at the Hit Factory. This is, 3348s, fully digital, analog machines. And I'm now this kind of kid walking around with this Pro Tool system, barely a Pro Tool system. And I would do this thing where I would take the SPDIF outs, run it to a DSP 4000, and then I'm going to go AAS out, and I could put that into a 3348 digital, 48 track tape machine. And I could take a couple tracks in and out and pitch correct vocals for people. So I started pitch correcting vocals. This was long before auto-tune. We would do it manually with the DSP 4000. And this was I knew they were doing this with like Luther Vandross was doing this, Michael Beinhorn was doing this, and it's actually listed in the DSP 4000 manual how to actually do this. But I was doing it pretty early on. Eventually that kind of weird system stopped working and I had to buy real Pro Tools hardware. Luckily, the work I was doing could afford me to do that. Called Sam Ash. They had like dirt cheap used Pro Tools hardware. It's a 442 system, which is, people say notoriously sounds bad, but actually if you use it right, it sounded pretty good. Now I had something like 12 tracks. I could actually like do a little bit more solid work, but this snowballed quickly. Like I jumped on the Pro Tools bandwagon pretty early on. So my first late night session was for Rakim, and it was a remix, and we had to time compress the vocal, and it was a big deal in this time in the 90s. So, I spent the night with the engineer, like working at this vocal, and I, for Rakim for this remix, and I'll never never forget being a college student at Berkeley, going up to Tower Records on Massachusetts Avenue, going into the vinyl section and flipping through it. And there's the Rakim record that I worked on over the summer. And I flip it over and it's got my name on it as the assistant. And I ran over to the clerk like, that's my name on this record. So excited about this as like a 19-year-old kid. Anyway, it's good days. So again, I'm sitting in the rooms where all that happened. So it's a pleasure to be sitting at the Hit Factory now.
What record was that? I love Rakim.
Heat It Up. I think it was from a movie soundtrack. It definitely was from a movie soundtrack. It was cool. And it was one of the producers from Public Enemy that did the remix too. So it was a good experience.
One of the Bomb Squad guys.
Yep.
Amazing. I mean, what an amazing era to be involved with. So much energy and so many people pushing boundaries, like you're saying, like, pushing the limits of like what hardware can do, sampling so that you can fit things onto a record in different time, and, like creating just like an entirely new kind of energy on the streets, really, and in the community for like music that was like sample based and had so much energy in it and was like really something new and different at the time, which is so exciting to be a part of.
100%. I mean, the 90s were an amazing place to come up as a young engineer in New York. This first studios that some of the earlier internships were, places like Chungking or this place called Power Play in Queens that were making some like pretty grimy hip hop records, you would say at the time. I say grimy just because they were like edgy street records. Like they were that sort of thing. And these were the guys that had SSLG series consoles or Neve V or VR series consoles, and the racks were just loaded with Pultecs. So when you hear people talking about like the Pultec trick, these days, that's all these guys would do, is just mess up samples with Pultecs all day long. So it was a lot of fun learning from that, and then getting to the cleaner studios like the Hit Factory, where now it was I'm playing them. You would say like it's just a different league of these heavy pop sessions, and the hip hop sessions we were doing there, like we would hear them on the radio like a day or two later. It was that quick because Hot 97 was right here. So it was a really magical time to be in New York. I'm excelling as an assistant at the Hit Factory. I'm beginning to get some decent assisting gigs. Eventually I get offered to assist on the Luther Vandross Christmas album. This is my first, working with one of major pop artists. He's actually Hit Factory's, number one client at the time. Spent the most money, spent the most studio time there because he's a local New Yorker. So I get to assist on the session. It was a string date. At the end of the session, I'm like, hey, do you want me to save a recall of the console in case we need to recall this? No, we'll never need to recall it again. Fine. I saved the recall anyway. About a week later, I get a phone call. Hey, do you have that recall by any chance? Because we need to recall the strings. Of course I do. So that sort of, got me in with that camp. So I'm still assisting, working on some high level stuff. I'm beginning to start engineering. I get a phone call, now that I'm starting to engineer more. Hey, we need you to assist this session. We want you to do it. It's like 3348 intensive. It's like a We Are the World kind of thing. There's going to be 1 million people here. You have to assist it. No, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm an engineer. So like, please do it. This is what it is. Not even please, just like, no, you have to do it. I'm like, okay, fine. Definitely. I'll do it. I go there. It turns out to be R. Kelly is producing this like benefit We Are the World thing day after an awards show. I get in really tight with his engineers. About 6 months later, I get a phone call. Hey, we're coming back to New York. We want you to be our engineer on this tracking session. So I go to the studio called Right Track. I meet one of the other resident engineers there, this guy named Brian Garton, and we make this R. Kelly record together for like 3 or 4 months. So that was just, an incredible experience. It was my first, working engineering outside of a place like the Hit Factory. So, that was great. Eventually go back to the Hit Factory, get to work with clients like Michael Jackson, working with, clients with like Missy Elliott. Missy and I got a phone call, one day on a Sunday night or Sunday afternoon saying, hey, can you come in tonight and mix this record? We need it done by tomorrow morning. I go in, mix the hell out of this record. It's the producers are there. They deliver it to the label the next day. Apparently Missy hears it. She's like, I love the record. I want to meet this guy. I want to do a recall. I want to add my vocal to it. After that, we started working together. I was her tracking engineer and her mixing engineer, also doing a bit of programming, getting on into the early Pro Tools thing with her. Really, we were still pretty heavy analog. We would bump it up to 3348 when we had, when it got to that point in the project. And we were using Pro Tools mainly as an editor at that point, or pitch corrector at that point, or, printing mixes to it. So, work with Missy, I eventually go freelance. I start working in like smaller production rooms, really, like 120 square foot. It's like, Pro Tools rig and like maybe a control surface. Still, freelancing at the Hit Factory, still working with Luther. Eventually, through those assistant gigs with Luther, I became his tracking engineer, and it became his tracking engineer because of my pitch correction ability. Luther was a lunatic, one of the best vocalists I've ever worked with in my life, but he's also one of the best vocal compers I've ever worked with. He knew how to get the very best performance out of himself and then push himself even that much further to get himself to try something even new. And if it was slightly out of time or slightly out of tune, we could fix that, but we were really going after the vibe. And that was the coolest thing, like learning from someone like that on how to comp vocals and how to really just go for the vibe, because we can, fix whatever later. And you're working with someone that can sing it perfectly every time, whatever you want to call perfectly. So, work with Missy, eventually go freelance. With Missy, she produces a lot of records. That was, the big thing with her. I was working with her as a producer. So one of the first artists we worked with were, Whitney Houston, Destiny's Child. I like bringing my giant ass Pro Tools rig out to Whitney Houston's house in New Jersey with Missy to go work on, what was the My Love Is Your Love album. We had two songs on there.
So at what point did you think about like moving from studio engineering into live mixing? Like how did that transition happen?
So working with Missy, I would always work on her live shows from my studio, and it would be the sort of thing where I would put the show tape together with her, either in person or, phone calls and text messages. But I'd eventually talk to the choreographer and then send out 2-track to the DJ who was ultimately going to play it. Eventually shows get more complex and we need, time code based shows to drive the screens, drive the lights. And their clients are demanding it from them. So now I'm sending, time code based mixes, and now we essentially need playback. So I'm, working on devising a system for the DJ to play it back. Eventually it just becomes way more simple for me to go there and just run playback for the show. The DJ's still going to do his thing, where I'm actually running through the DJs if I was the 2-track, so he can cut the music off, do his scratches, play sound effects, really make it sound like a DJ show. But now I'm running playback. But the productions just keep getting bigger and bigger. One of the first shows we did was was Project Yellow in New York. It's Pharrell's organization, for schools benefit. But shortly after that, we were doing Essence Festival, which was New Orleans Superdome, 100,000 people, running playback there. So those are really some of like my first big live shows of being there. From this was about 2019, so we're getting close to 2020. Missy wins the Video Vanguard Award. So I meet a bunch of television people from VH1 and really get a feel for, this large scale television show. I'd been to the Grammys before, I'd worked at the Grammys before, and certainly other award shows, but this was, being intimately involved with the television team because we were the Video Vanguard Award winner. I meet their playback guy, the network playback guy or the television playback guy there. He and I get tight. I say, what's up with television? How we get a television? He goes, don't you know these folks over at Good Morning America? The guys, this person. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I haven't spoken to them in 15 years. Give them a call. Go over there, GMA crew. Hey, it'd be perfect for the music crew. We got the summer concert series coming up. Let's do this. But, you got to learn how to do television first. So train to be an A2, like learn how to put lavs on people, just like learn the process, learn what a rundown is, like learn how to make TV. Great. This is fun. I'm learning how to make like broadcast TV. As I'm sitting there doing one of their major political events as an A2, we get word that they're shutting down the country because of COVID. So this turned into like a great COVID gig because now I'm working on Good Morning America. It's local to New York. We can still, get back and forth into the city. We're like the only people traveling around the city. Pretty surreal being in New York, in Times Square, on a regular basis. But it was, all that aside, it was really, really great way to learn television and get into becoming an A1 over at ABC. COVID clears up and the summer concert series comes around. They need someone to mix front of house. Of course I'm going to mix front of house. I've kind of done it here and there before, even going back, for things, but this is a little bit more serious. We're doing major artists for television. So, I start doing front of house. Still working with Missy. We end up doing the Lovers and Friends Festival in Las Vegas. Find out my friend Brian Garton is there working with Mariah. Brian, we got to meet for a cup of coffee. Brian and I meet for a cup of coffee. We haven't seen each other in, at least a decade. Hey, what are you doing? We're here with Missy. We're actually like A stage, B stage. We're right next to each other. So we're talking, something comes up. They need someone to run playback for them at this overseas date that they have coming up. So, hey, sure, I'll run playbacks, kind of meet the team, get with them. Hey, we're doing something for, I think it was Billboard Music Awards. We need an A1. Perfect. I'm definitely there. Hey, we've got this residency coming up, in Las Vegas. Do you want to mix front of house? Hell yeah. Of course I want to mix front of house. Oh, so what's the venue? Oh, it's Park MGM Dolby Live. Oh, they've got a Dolby Atmos system there. If you want to use it, it's their worldwide flagship facility. There's no other theater like it in the world. Of course, I want to use it. We have to use it. They say, well, if the Atmos doesn't beat the stereo, we're not going to use it. So I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. Let's go.
Dude, what an awesome journey you've had. Like, what a great story. And it just kind of like reinforces that, you know, you take chances experimenting with gear, but it's also like about like the people you know too, and like the network that you have and the ability to be like flexible, be in the right place at the right time, but like use that skill set that you've built up just out of passion to like allow yourself to move on, or like be in the right place to move on.
Once we accepted that challenge, it was incredible how much support we got from Dolby, because now we had to figure out how to mix a live show in Dolby Atmos, which is a little bit different than mixing it, you know, in the near field or the midfield. We're dealing with it's a 5,000 plus, capacity theater. And it's big. So we have to, main thing is the acoustical delay that we have to deal with, but also just wrapping our heads around what is a concert in Atmos? You know, where do the drums go? How risky can we get with that kind of stuff? You know, what are we going to do with the background vocals? You know, what can we do with more percussive elements or more, sort of like, lush kind of pads? So, after many talks with Dolby, many introductory Zoom meetings with Dolby, they book me in the Dolby screening room in New York. They give me an identical control package to what I'm going to have in the theater. And we set up and we just listen to Atmos mixes, and I pull up some multi-tracks and we start getting an idea of what Atmos sounds like. Now, again, we're in a movie theater. It's not the theater, but it's an incredible Atmos rig. And if you ever get the opportunity to check out that theater, there's so many, side channels that when they pan stuff around the room, it just sounds like it's crawling across the room. It's just an incredible experience. So, you go there for a couple of days. This is great. As I'm speaking with the folks there, they say, hey, we've got an iPad app that'll do static snapshots. It chases time code. I'm like, okay, that's cool. They're like, oh, but if your playback guy is running Pro Tools, we can use the Dolby Music Panner and just drive our renderer with that. I'm like, playback guy, Pro Tools. I'm like, I'm going to run Pro Tools at front of house and let's just drive the renderer that way. They're like, cool, easy enough. We get it running. We, have the discussion, pack up, feeling very confident, move out to prep, go out to, Claire Brothers, getting prepped. Now I'm using the home renderer, the music renderer, in prep, sort of just, get things together. Once we get to rehearsal, then Dolby coordinates with Genelec and gives us, I just say Genelec. Dolby coordinates with Genelec and gives us a full Dolby Atmos rig at our rehearsal studio in center staging. And again, we're just continuing on. But again, this is all mixing in the near field or really the midfield at this point. But still, like, people are excited about it. The band is getting excited about it. Management is excited about it. Like the whole thing. And I'm stoked, and it's an easy workflow, becoming an easy workflow. And I love that we're doing something new where no one's ever driven the live renderer with the Pro Tools Music Panner before. So we get to the theater, and the fun stuff was learning, like, okay, you get there day one, you're in the movie theater, and it's like, okay, I'm going to make every drum an object and like figure out the place to put all the drums. And it's just what a kid would do, right? Sort of like just playing around. And you quickly learn that stuff doesn't really work, that the drums kind of have to go across the front, whether it's left and right or LCR, unless you're doing something really tricky or special effecty. Because this is a concert after all. It's got to be, the attention needs to be on the stage, and it needs to feel, more than anything, feel like a concert. Feel like an enhanced concert when in Dolby Atmos. Same thing with the bass. Like, we would do things like experiment. Is the bass going to be left and right, phantom center, or is the bass going to be in the center channel? Where it got more interesting for me, it's like, okay, now I want to add a chorus to the bass. So now I'm going to do something like a quad chorus. Like, I would take the same kind of chorus that I would use, but do slightly different settings in the front, slightly different settings in the back. That's kind of like old 5.1 tricks. So that kind of stuff was fun, sort of like filling up a bass chorus in the room. Finding places for where's the piano going to go. This show is incredibly piano heavy. And there's times where we want the piano to really sit in the band, and times where we want it to literally like come out a little bit more. And Atmos gave us the ability to do that. What really got fun was on like really lush string pads where we can really fill up the room with that because it's not so percussive. The issues we would have in the theater with percussive elements were the acoustic delay between speakers and where different audience members are sitting. It's just a matter of like, if the speakers are 120 feet apart, you're never going to overcome that 120 milliseconds. The same way this is the same in concert sound. We deal with this all the time with just the stereo PA. It's just a, fact of live sound. But the cool thing about, working in Atmos is have the ability to figure it out and what's going to work, what's not going to work. Place the lusher, bigger stuff. Like on the Christmas residency, one of the comments I got over and over again is they love the way the choir sounded. Well, the choir was running through this like 360, not only doubler, but also 360 reverb that was then being downmixed to Dolby Atmos. It was just this huge immersive thing that was happening in the theater, and you're never going to get that in any other kind of place. To go back to the theater, I mean, the theater is one of the most incredibly designed places. It's I always joke around and say it's like a little kid designed. I'm going to design the craziest PA system I could ever design, because there's so many PA hangs. And not only that, it's set up, for each section. So it's not just the entire house. It's like your section is going to get the Atmos experience. It's really a phenomenal feat of engineering.
It really is. And shout out to Mark Tuffy and Cameron and the entire crew that put all that together. Like what an amazing experience. I think there's like 400 speakers in that space. And those, like zones that are in like the mezzanine level or in the center that get that perfectly time aligned experience is like such a cool way to experience it. I sat in many different seats in that theater to like check out what it was like and stood on the floor. And I was just absolutely amazed at like how like sonically it's just sounded so beautiful everywhere. Like there is not a bad seat, like literally in that entire place for an Atmos performance.
100%. I mean, what we would do is, so I would take an iPad and remote into the console, and then take a couple of laptops and remote into my virtual soundcheck rig, and another laptop that was controlling my virtual outboard, and we would sit in each zone of the theater and listen to our Atmos mixes. Once we got to the theater, Mark Tuffy and Cameron was there, like, every day with us, totally awesome guy and so super knowledgeable. Not only that, let us experiment. Let us change the PA. Let us change the tuning of the PA. Let us change, over time. It gave us access over time, to let us, experiment with things. But we would sit in each zone of the theater, remote into the console, control the rig, remotely, and like get a feel for what it sounded like. The balcony sounds awesome, by the way. If any, it really does. I think it's a really, the whole theater sounds awesome, but, I don't know. I think they'd be surprised at just how good it sounds up there as well.
It really does. And that's so cool that you like QC'd it all around the room, and like you really want to, right? Because you want to make sure that the intent is on the stage and that the show is right and that it's focused, but you can now make it sound bigger than ever, like huge in fact, but you still want to keep things intimate in a lot of ways for, these people that have such a relationship with these songs and with the artist and with the band and all of that. So you've got this sense of responsibility to like maintain original creative intent, but bring them something new, right? Like a new way to experience it. And like, obviously with Mariah's voice, like so iconic, that incredible 5-octave range, and probably one of the main features of the show, certainly. Like, how did you think about like that presentation in a live Atmos environment and make sure to like retain her delivery and intent while kind of presenting it in a new enhanced kind of way?
Absolutely. We spent a lot of time of where that vocal is going to be placed. If it's going to be, again, fan up center, if it's in the center, if it's pushed out slightly, into the center of the house, we would experiment with it. Mainly we would really give that center channel to mostly her in the end. It was like, that was her channel. And certainly, it's going to effects that are feeding the rest of it into the center as well. So it's not a completely dry center. Like there's other stuff going on there. I was using immersive reverbs, in the end. In addition to those front and back tricks that I would do with sort of the old school reverbs. The show is certainly all about her voice, and that's all anybody is there to hear. Primarily what they care about is what her voice is going to sound like. The rest is, of kind of whatever. The band always sounds great. The playback always sounds great. It's my job to make the show sound great. And, we do a good job with the stereo. Once we got to Atmos, it was okay. Now how do we approach this? Because, a song like Hero is a really good example of how you can make it sound like small and intimate in the beginning, and it turns into such a big power ballad in the end. And to have stuff start panning like into the room as the song pans out, because we were driving it dynamically with Pro Tools and instead of just using static snapshots, and also, as the arrangement builds, some parts of those arrangements are going to pop out in the house instead of just being, in the front, and really just fill up the house. I always would get that feeling as a kid of like, I always wanted music to surround me, and being able to actually do that, with Dolby Atmos and get that feeling. It does give me the chills, and I want the audience to feel that too. I want it to be an emotional experience. Going back to that thing of this, if it doesn't beat the stereo, we're not going to use it. So we would sort of get, used to it, and then we'd flip back to our stereo mix and be like, oh wow, yeah, that does sound really small now. And we're still using the stereo. We're still QCing the stereo because it's got to go out to other feeds. So we're listening to our stereo that's happening at the same time as the Atmos. But when we would switch to it, we would definitely hear the difference. Where it was really fun with Mariah was on her Christmas show, because a lot of that has these like big Disney moments. So we could really lean into the, theatrical panning type of thing, which was pretty cool. On the pop show, occasionally we want to do the gimmicky thing where we want to pan something around the room and get people to really notice, like, hey, there's stuff going on all around your head. So we would do that with like some of the guest rapper vocals, like say on an intro vocal. There's a song, where ODB does the intro, and we would, he shouts out different cities. So we would have like the different cities and different parts of the room. So that stuff is fun, but the whole concert needs to be focused on the music and focused on her vocal. That's what's most important.
How has the show in Atmos kind of evolved over time? It's nice to have a residency, right? I'm sure you're in one space for an extended run, and you understand the room, and you've helped to like kind of evolve the show over time. I think you guys did 35 plus shows there across 2024, 2025. Like, how did it evolve in Atmos? Like, what did you learn as you went along? I'm sure a number of things, but things that you were able to kind of bring to the show to maybe like create a new enhanced version of the song that maybe was different than what you started with at the beginning of the run.
Yeah, absolutely. It was such the way things evolved there. The beginning was like raw experimentation, of how we're going to do this. And it was lots and lots of pre-production time, playing back virtual sound checks, sitting around that room and mixing the show, and, getting, everyone to feel good about it. Once we had our panning dialed in, I would say, by the second residency, we kept basically the same panning file, maybe made some tweaks, likely added some songs, and just dialed in the mix a bit more. At that point, we started focusing more on the PA. We had tuned the PA a bit the first time around, and then we started working a bit more on the PA and what we were hearing there, and getting our stereo and what we're hearing in the PA to match a little bit better. So we're looking sort of like more of a reference here. But, once again, to speak to Mark Tuffy and Cameron, and also, the entire crew at Park MGM, they're wonderful to work with, and they certainly gave us all this access, once they trusted us. By the third, also, speaking of, by the time we got to the second residency, some of the recommendations that we had made for the PA, they had taken our advice for, and they had actually implemented them, gave them a shot, and they seemed to work. Some of the other things that we came up with were like, okay, instead of sending stereo or mono at the front fills, why don't we make the front fills more like the left and right, or like the LCR? That way, make them a little bit lower, and they're still maybe getting a bit more of that immersive experience instead of, just making it stereo for the front row. So experiment with that kind of stuff. And they said they eventually passed that knowledge down to other folks, and they tried that stuff out, and they ended up using it as well. So it's kind of fun, now that we're like working with Dolby, and like, we're kind of teaching each other, they're teaching us stuff, and we're trying to, teach them what we can figure out from there. Now, I also meet the automotive team, because they're taking their clients to see different events, and they start telling me about this car that they're developing with Cadillac called the Optic. And speaking with them along the way, and they're telling me how they're sitting outside a recording studio with this car. They're with AKG. They're tuning the car. How good this thing sounds. They're giving me the specs about it. How this is a Dolby Atmos car, and I'm getting really excited about it because I'm mixing this show in Dolby Atmos, and I have a Denon Dolby Atmos receiver at home. But other than that, I can't really listen to Atmos content anywhere. And the Atmos rig that I do have is comprised of portable Genelecs. It's made for sort of portable mixing. It's not set up in my house. It's not set up all the time. Anyway, excited about the car. They're telling me more and more about the car. I eventually call my dealership. I'm like, I want to hear this. I want to see this car. I want to hear this car as soon as possible. Turns out that they haven't even pushed the Atmos update to these cars yet. I'm like, but I've heard the stereo and I've driven the car. I'm in the market for a car. I leased the car. uh, John Coburn, chief of engineering of GM, gets word of this, and he pushes the Atmos software to my car. I'm like one of like 3 people in the country that have this Atmos software, and I'm sitting in front of my apartment building like 1:00 in the morning, downloading this software update, and I listen to it, and there's a video of me somewhere of just like yelling expletives on how good this thing sounds, and I can't believe what I'm listening to. So that was an incredible experience. But at that point, I'm like, wow, this is my reference listening environment. If we get another residency, I got to take this thing to Las Vegas. Sure enough, we do. And now I'm, driving the car all the time. First of all, it's a beautiful car. Also, like the car itself is an incredibly like well thought out. You can tell a lot of love went into this vehicle. And again, it's the optic that I'm driving. So take the car to Las Vegas. Now, the one thing we never could really do in the theater was record a show in Immersive and go listen to it someplace else. To just, you can say every reason of how we could have set this up. That's a lot of work that we have to do in touring. It's just wasn't that thing. Anyway, bring the car to Las Vegas. I tell my team I'm bringing the car to Las Vegas. They're like, Paul, you're crazy. Why are you bringing your car to Las Vegas? I'm like, trust me, I'm bringing this car to Las Vegas. This is it. They're like, okay, ship the car to Las Vegas. We're there. It shows up. I bring my systems engineer into the car. We listen to the Marias, and it just blows his mind. And he's like, wow, now bringing the rest of my audio team into the car. And now, because they're only hearing Atmos in the theater, most people have never heard it, and they certainly have never heard it in a reference environment, and they certainly haven't heard it on like the environment that's sitting in that car. So this becomes a thing. So now we devise a way to start recording our shows in Immersive, putting them on a USB stick, bringing them out to the car, listening to them into the car, getting an idea of what the car sounds like, listening to content in the car, going back into the theater, listening to Atmos content in the theater, and making comparisons, because now for the first time we had a reference. So for those times where it's like, I feel like the rears could come up a little and maybe the sides could come up a little. And it's like, but I'm not, we're built into this mix, but I still feel like I want to get more energy out of there. But then we go listen to it in the car and we hear the same thing. And then we take something from the, any reference from the car, bring it back into the theater. And it's like, all right, let's bring up the sides like 2 dB and the rears up 1.5 dB, because now we have a reference. We're not just like guessing.
I mean, again, you're a pioneer. You're the first to do the car check with a live Dolby Atmos set, right? I mean, and like the car is such a cool way to experience Atmos, because like you're in this fixed position, it's enclosed, you've got overhead speakers, in many cases, speakers all around you. And, shout out to John Coburn, who you mentioned, and the audio team at Cadillac. They truly care about fidelity and creative intent, and they understand how important music is to the experience of being in a car. And, they really have done a lot of work to make sure that it's a really amazing system, and those AKG systems that they have in there, and that's standard in their EVs, starting with all their 2025s and newer. I think even with the Lyric and certainly the Optic and right on up. So an amazing way to experience it for sure. And so cool that you were able to do that check in there. That's a first.
To say they're enthusiastic about it is an understatement. It's really, really nice to see the support that Cadillac has for this technology, that they're legitimately, in my opinion, excited about it. It's really, really fun. Being an audio guy and being so into this mixing thing, and certainly the in-car mixing thing. When Missy and I started working together in like the 2005s, because we started together in the 90s. She moved to Florida. She came back to New York. We ended up, working on a couple more, singles together. And then mixing this song called Lose Control, which is, huge hit of hers, that was mixed in my production room. Pretty much all my production room. We started it at Quad Studios, finished in my production room, over the course of a couple of months, minor tweaks here and there as we were working on the rest of her record. But working in my production room, car check is super important. Eventually we built, her, studio out in New Jersey. And in the beginning, it's really just a Pro Tools rig and a synth and like a JBL, pair of JBL Eons. So we'd work out there and I'd have to go listen in my car for sure. So car check has always been super important to me. Mixing in the car is I know this is something that I'm super excited about. So what I would often do is, first you do the car check, you listen to it. In this day and age, it's like a Dropbox link, stream the Dropbox link off your phone, Bluetooth to the car, or USB key, however you want to do it. Then for me, it's kind of the next step. And what I've actually been doing in the Optic is streaming from my studio to the head unit in the car and controlling my studio with an iPad through the Wi-Fi, and at least working on stereo mixes that way. So for me, the next step is, I've got a Linux box that will definitely convert multi-channel into something, something Dolby EC3 at least. So we'll see. That's, my current, sort of like, side project, tinkering kind of thing. But I truly see like Dolby car check for real, coming very soon.
As of today, 36 automobile manufacturers announced or on the road today with Dolby Atmos in them, and Cadillac's just one of many. But such an amazing way to experience it and to be able to use it as a creative space as well. I think that's the next frontier. We'll have to have you back on to like share that workflow and how that experience has been for sure.
No doubt. Cadillac by far is so close to my heart in everything that they do for the music creative community. But to your point of it being so many other manufacturers. So a quick shout out to Pioneer because I went and checked out their booth at NAMM. And what they're doing with the aftermarket, because I've also got a 2011 Mustang GT that I love. It's a manual. Where it's completely the opposite of a Cadillac Optic, where the Optic wants to literally do everything for you. The Mustang does nothing for you. But it's got a standard 2011 car stereo system in it. And these guys were showing a head unit that you swap in, and it's got virtualized height channels, which doesn't quite sound like height channels, but their virtualization is really damn good. And it sounded great. I'm excited to try that thing out in an aftermarket environment.
I heard that too. Pioneer Sphera, their aftermarket head unit in that 4-speaker configuration. I heard it in a 4-speaker Toyota, and I was really amazed at like how good it sounded. Like truly, just well done by Pioneer, and such a cool solution for vehicles that are older that may not, like newer vehicles may not be able to have that retrofit done just due to all like the technology and the way that they're laid out these days. But like for older vehicles, like absolutely right. So I wanted to also ask like what feedback you've gotten on the show itself, like from fans or colleagues or from other people. Obviously, like Mariah is one of the most iconic artists with incredibly passionate fan base spanning generations all over the world. But what has been the fan reaction or colleagues' reaction to experiencing the show in Atmos at Dolby Live that you've gotten?
Two things there in that, first of all, you kind of don't want them to notice, right? That's like saying like you want the movie to sound good, but you don't want to like notice all the individual elements of the sound design. You just want to watch the movie. So, you hope that fans enjoy it. And when people come over to front of house and they like give you a thumbs up or wave to you or like, whatever it is, that means a lot. More than anything, you just want them to enjoy it. One of the, when we're doing the Christmas show, the comment was more like, the show sounds great, but that Atmos shit, meaning I don't know how to say that in a nice way, or should I say, the show sounds great, but that Atmos stuff is really like is amazing, because that was really leaning into those Disney moments where you hear it. The rest of it was just like, wow, the show sounds, on the pop show, again, my goal for that was to make it sound like a concert and for people to like the way it sounded, and the comment was always that the show sounded good. That was. I don't want people to notice the Atmos. What they would notice would be like ODB spinning around your head. And sometimes you would get the comment, they're like, oh, I heard that. But, unless it's sometimes you'd get an engineer that would show up that would make some comments. But like, the audience member isn't going to be like, hey, the way you had that immersive reverb on the choir, or the way you did that, that whatever doubler, or I know upmixing is not necessarily something we would do with stereo mixes, but what is fun to do in an upmixing thing in a live environment is something like take a B3, like a Hammond B3, and then run that through an upmixer, because it's going to do all sorts of crazy like phase and panning things. One of my favorite upmixers is the original Dolby Surround that was like built into home stereo systems. Without a doubt, was like I almost want to find an old analog unit and retrofit it for the studio, because it was such a cool sounding upmixer for effects like that, but certainly not for like 2 tracks.
Yeah, you do have that sense of responsibility to give the fans, a show that is going to retain original artistic intent and translate and make sure that like the story's being told the way that the artist wants it to as well. And you're almost transparent in a way. And then, you've got some little extra moments that you can add to it that they may not even know what it was, but they kind of felt something.
In the sense that, yes, you want to deliver the fans' best experience. I mean, Mariah is the boss. She's the most important, right? But the audience really is what we're here for. We're here to serve the audience. We want the fans to walk away and just feel like they went to a great concert. I want it to sound good. I want people to tell me it sounds good. You know, in the end, I have to feel confident that it sounds good and know for myself before I can ask for that from other people. But again, like those smiles and those high fives and the occasionally when they would actually notice the panning was kind of cool.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on all of that work. I know it was incredibly labor intensive, time intensive, but I think you really, pushed the boundaries for what's possible and delivered a show that everybody was very excited about and really showcased what's possible with live Dolby Atmos experiences in that venue. So thank you for sharing all of that. You're also like super active, as you mentioned, in the broadcast world, including with Good Morning America. You're the founder of Illuminate Artists, your production company, right? Can you share a little bit about like the other things you do in the industry or creatively that you're excited about?
With Illuminate Artists, it's awesome because with Missy, for instance, I was one of the musical directors on her Coachella set. So that's, getting my guys to handle some of the editing, bringing my playback guy there and, interfacing with the audio team and sort of overseeing that. That kind of work is a blast. Getting more into show programming and show design, I'm working with, some young folks now and they're sort of mind-blowingly good at lighting design and screens. So we'll kind of see where that goes, into this year. But for the most part, it's been, personnel and equipment and overseeing more playback, show tape, and, working with the audio team to deliver the best environment. The ABC thing has been awesome because it's broadcast television and something I never really thought I would be working in. And it's a different type of engineering. And I love taking that skill set the same way I love taking the skills that I've learned in other areas and sort of swapping them. I want things to sound good and they want to make sure that they get a television show on the air because it's broadcast TV and it's going on at 7:00 in the morning. And it's just a different, live concerts are intense. Certainly studio sessions are intense. People in the live concert and broadcast world tend to think that it's a little more laid back in the studio. They're like, well, you can do it over and over. I'm like, no, you have to be ready to get the take. You can't do like the takeover. So the broadcast thing is fun. It's a lot fewer channel count most of the time, and it's more about getting those faders up and down at the right times. But those times where you can really dig in and make something sound good, it can be a lot of fun. And those times where you dig in, especially working in broadcast news, they can be very dramatic moments. There was like when the troops were returning home from Afghanistan, or like these very, very serious trials, and it's like a very key witness. I listen to these other networks, and like you could barely hear what they're saying. At that point, like I'm digging into that dialogue, trying to make sure like people can actually hear what this very important witness is saying. So it's just different. I think there's definitely lots of broadcast engineers who'd be like, "Why are you working so hard? Just push the fader up." But I think I've met a lot of other engineers that are, they really want to get the stuff to sound as good as possible. Certainly the guys that are working on like the award shows, those guys are top tier and only care about sound quality. But when you're talking about a TV show that's, or some of the broadcast news shows that are on the air like 4 times a day, they're just getting them out as fast as possible. So it's just fun to learn the different environments.
So what's next for you, Paul? More live Dolby Atmos mixing or in the studio? Anything you're excited about that you want to share?
We're doing playback with Keith Urban, which is a super fun thing for me. Working in country music is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. What's fun about working with playback on a live band, most of the shows that I do, like when we did, Coachella with Missy, there's a live band, but it's playback heavy. And, when you hit that space bar, that thing's running like a freight train, and it's just, make sure all the programming is done ahead of time, make sure that computer is not going to stop, which was redundant. Of course it's not, but you're just monitoring it. All the hard work has been done. Maybe there's a couple times where you need to like, it hits a cue where you need to just start it again. The Keith gig is different where you have to, follow but there's really not much playback going on. It's just little things here and there, but you really got to follow the band because it's a live band and the whole show is the band. So it's very, it's a new team to me. So I don't want to say, too much, but I'm like really excited, to go out with Keith. It's going to be a fun month.
Many thanks to my guest, Paul Falcone, for sharing his story and the great work he's doing to shape Dolby Atmos live performances. Check out more of his work at paulfalcone.com and check mariahcarey.com for her latest news. To see what's coming up at Dolby Live at Park MGM in Las Vegas, go to dolby.com or search for Dolby Live. For more conversations with creatives using Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision, check out the Dolby Creator Talks podcast on all the major podcast platforms, including the video version on YouTube. The links are in our show notes, or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're curious to know more about Dolby Creator Lab, go to dolbycreatorlab.com to find information about all of our programming. There you can subscribe to our mailing list and access the entire library of episodes of this podcast. That's where you'll also find the Dolby Atmos Music Accelerator and Dolby Atmos Learning courses covering all the topics you need to get started creating and mixing in Dolby Atmos. The courses are always free and available in multiple languages. And for other great resources for creatives, check out the link in our show notes. Until next time, this is Ben Givarz with Dolby Creator Lab at Dolby Laboratories. You can follow me on Instagram at creatorlab.ben. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Snyder and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon, and our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for listening. Cheers.